6 reasons you're better off alone at 70. Let me tell you something most people won't dare say out loud. Being alone at 70 might just be the best thing that ever happened to you. Now, I know how that sounds. Society's been whispering in your ear for decades, telling you that being alone is something to fear. That if your phone's not buzzing, your calendar's not full, and your doorbell's not ringing, something must be wrong with you. That friends, parties, and people are what keep you young and happy. But here's what they don't tell you. When you hit 70, everything changes. The noise of life quiets down. The masks people wear start to slip off. The people you thought would always be around start to drift, some by choice, some by fate. And one morning, you might wake up and realize that the world's not as loud, not as crowded, not as needy as it once felt. And for the first time in a long time, you can hear yourself think. That silence. It's not loneliness, it's freedom. I'm speaking to you not as some expert, not as some motivational coach with bright lights and a polished script. I'm speaking to you as an old man who's lived long enough to see the truth behind smiles, to feel the ache of both presence and absence, and to finally understand what matters when the years start moving faster than you do. I used to think I needed people to feel alive, that being surrounded was the sign of a life well lived. But over time, I've learned something radical. You don't need a crowd to find meaning. You don't need to be seen to feel significant. And sometimes it's only when you're finally alone that you realize how heavy it's been to carry everyone else's expectations. At 70, you've earned the right to live life on your own terms, to stop explaining, to stop proving, to stop performing. This isn't a sad story. It's not a tale of giving up. It's the beginning of something powerful. This is your season of peace, of simplicity, of sacred stillness. In this message, I'm going to share with you 6 reasons why being alone at this stage of life isn't just okay, it's beautiful. I'm not here to sell you on solitude. I'm here to show you what it reveals, because when the noise dies down and the world stops pulling at your sleeve, that's when you finally meet the strongest, clearest, most honest version of yourself. So sit back, breathe deep, and listen. What you're about to hear might just change how you see the rest of your life. Reason 1. Freedom from fake companionship. When you're younger, you collect people like souvenirs. You think the more you have, the richer you are. Friends from work, neighbors, cousins, drinking buddies, acquaintances you don't even really like. But you keep them around because they fill up space. They distract you from yourself. You go to dinners, show up at events, laugh at jokes that don't land, and nod along with conversations that leave you feeling emptier than before. And you convince yourself this is friendship, this is connection, this is what being alive is supposed to look like. But then you get older, you hit 70, and something inside you shifts. You start to realize how many of those relationships were built on convenience, not closeness. How many of those people liked what you did for them more than they liked who you were? You see clearly now, the ones who only called when they needed something, the ones who disappeared when you stopped being useful. The ones who smiled in your face but rolled their eyes behind your back, and it hurts a little, but it also sets you free. Because now you're no longer under pressure to entertain those kinds of people. You don't have to keep answering the phone out of obligation. You don't have to attend one more fake lunch or pretend you're interested in people who never truly saw you. There's a kind of peace that comes when you don't have to wear any more masks. When you no longer feel guilty for choosing solitude over small talk, when you finally understand that being alone isn't sad, it's honest. You stop chasing people. You stop trying to keep up. You let go of the fear that used to whisper, if you don't keep people around, you'll be lonely. Now you see the truth. Nothing is lonelier than being surrounded by people who don't care. And that's why being alone at 70 isn't tragic. It's a gift. You've been through enough to know what real friendship feels like, and you're no longer willing to settle for less. You'd rather walk alone in peace than sit with 10 people and feel like a stranger. You finally get to protect your space, your time, your heart. And let me tell you, that kind of freedom is priceless. Reason 2. You finally get to know who you really are. For most of your life, you've been someone for someone else. You were the provider, the caretaker, the problem solver. The dependable one, the one who kept everything moving, kept everyone safe, kept it all together even when you were falling apart inside. You wore so many roles, it's easy to forget who you were underneath all of them. But when the kids grow up and move on, when the house gets quiet, when the phone stops ringing as often and your calendar opens wide, you're left with the one person you've rarely had time for, yourself. And at first, that silence can be unsettling. You might sit in your chair and wonder, who am I now? What's left of me now that I'm not needed the way I used to be? But keep sitting, keep listening, because something sacred begins to rise from that silence. A voice you haven't heard in decades, your own. You start to remember what you used to love. You feel the pull of old passions you set aside to raise children, run households, or pay bills. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's painting, maybe it's long walks at sunrise, or just sitting in your backyard watching birds fly by. And you don't do it to impress anyone. You do it because it feels like home. When you're alone, you finally have time to think without interruption, to feel without filtering, to be without explanation. You realize you've been carrying burdens you never had to, that some of the things you thought were your personality were just coping mechanisms for a noisy world, that being busy was a shield against being forgotten. But now, you're not afraid to be forgotten. You're ready to be remembered by you. Being alone at 70 is a doorway, not a dead end. It's a chance to meet yourself again, and you'll be surprised by how much strength, wisdom, humor, and depth you find in that person. You spent your life showing up for others. Now it's time to show up for yourself, not because you're selfish, but because you've finally earned the right to be whole. And reason 3, you learn to love without depending. One of the greatest illusions of youth is this idea that love must always be tied to presence. That if someone isn't there beside you, talking, texting, hugging, checking in, then the love must be fading. We confuse proximity with affection. But when you've lived long enough, when you've seen people come and go, when you've loved and lost, and even loved again, you begin to realize something deeper. You can love without clinging. You can care without needing. You can give your heart without losing your soul. That's the kind of love that begins to grow when you're alone at 70. Not the loud, needy love of youth that's built on fear and constant reassurance, but the quiet, mature love that expects nothing and still gives everything. You stop depending on others to fill your emotional cup. You stop measuring your worth by how many people show up for your birthday. You stop tying your peace to someone else's presence. You love people from a distance if you have to. You forgive without needing an apology. You release without bitterness. You remember without aching. Because now you understand that love isn't about possession. It's about presence of heart, even in absence of body. Being alone doesn't mean your heart is empty. In fact, it may be fuller than it's ever been. Full of gratitude, full of memories, full of compassion for yourself and for others who are still on their journey. You can think of someone fondly without needing to hear from them. You can miss someone deeply and still live fully. You can pray for someone's peace, even if they've long stopped being part of your life. That's real love, pure love, unattached love. And it's only when you spend time alone, truly alone, that you realize how beautiful that kind of love is. Because when you don't need anyone to complete you, you become free to love them fully, honestly, and without fear. You stop grasping. You stop chasing. You start flowing. You start giving without losing. That's a kind of strength only solitude can teach you. Reason 4. Your time becomes your own, and that's a gift. There's something no one tells you when you're younger. Most of your time isn't really yours. It's owned by jobs, family responsibilities, obligations, appointments, errands, favors, and the demands of keeping everything in motion. You wake up early because someone else needs you to. You sacrifice your rest because something urgent always comes up. Your day is full of people pulling on your time, your energy, your attention, and you give it without question. Because that's what you're supposed to do. Because that's what being reliable looks like. But at 70, something changes. That sense of urgency fades. People stop expecting you to show up for everything. The house is quieter. The calendar has blank spaces, and for the first time in a long, long time, your time belongs to you again. And it's not empty time, it's sacred time. Time to sit in the sun and sip your coffee slowly. Time to think without being interrupted. Time to finally open that book you've been meaning to read for 20 years. Time to pray, to reflect, to just be. And the best part, you don't have to explain it to anyone. There's no guilt, no pressure, no rush. You start to realize how precious your minutes are. You no longer waste them trying to please people who wouldn't cross the street for you. You no longer give away your peace to every ringing phone. You guard your hours like treasure because that's exactly what they are. Your energy becomes selective. Your attention becomes deliberate. You only spend time on what truly matters, and that's one of the greatest freedoms age can give you. You've earned your mornings. You've earned your silence. You've earned your right to say no without apology and yes without hesitation. There's something holy about being able to choose what fills your days, about living slow, about doing less, but feeling more. Being alone at 70 doesn't mean you're forgotten. It means you finally have the space to live life on purpose. And you'll come to find peace isn't loud. It doesn't need applause. It simply fills the room quietly when you're no longer in a hurry to chase the things that never mattered. Reason 5. You stop apologizing for who you are. You spend a lot of your life trying to fit in, trying to keep people comfortable. You learn early on which parts of yourself to tone down, which opinions to swallow, which feelings to hide so that you don't make anyone uncomfortable. You get good at editing yourself, smiling when you're hurting, nodding when you disagree, laughing at jokes that really aren't funny, all to avoid conflict. All to be liked, all to belong. But here's the gift age gives you. At 70, you finally stop asking permission to be yourself. You've lived long enough to know who you are and, more importantly, who you're not. You're no longer trying to impress people who don't matter. You're not bending over backward to win the approval of people who never saw your value in the first place. You're not hiding your truth just to keep the peace. You speak plainly now. You live honestly. You say no without guilt. You say yes because you mean it, not because you're afraid to disappoint someone. You no longer shrink to make others feel tall. You no longer apologize for being too much, too quiet, too bold, too sensitive, too opinionated, too you. You've made mistakes. You've failed. You've succeeded. You've risen, fallen, and risen again. And through it all, you've learned that your scars are not shame, they're survival. They're proof that you made it through what others never even saw. You've cried in silence. You've sacrificed without thanks. You've been overlooked, underestimated, and misunderstood, and yet you're still here. Wiser, stronger, softer, not weaker. Being alone at 70 doesn't mean you're less loved. It means you finally have the courage to love yourself without apology. And once you stop needing to be accepted by everyone else, you find that you become your own best company. The silence doesn't scare you anymore. The stillness doesn't feel empty. It feels like home. You don't chase people who walk away. You don't beg anyone to stay, because now you understand those who truly value you will never need convincing. And those who don't, you bless them and let them go. Reason 6. You discover peace in the present. When you're younger, your mind is always racing. What's next? What's wrong? What if? What now? You're always somewhere else, living ahead of yourself or stuck behind yourself. You worry about tomorrow. You replay yesterday. And the present? It passes by like a blur. But something beautiful happens when you reach 70. You slow down enough to see your life. Not just the milestones, not just the memories, but the moment you're in right now. You sit on your porch and notice the way the sunlight hits the trees. You feel the warmth of your teacup in your hand. You listen to the wind, you hear your own heartbeat, you feel your breath, and suddenly that breath is enough. You're no longer rushing to build a future. You're no longer weighed down by all you should have done in the past. You realize the only place where peace actually lives is right here, now. And in that stillness, you meet God again. Not in thunder or in fire, but in the gentle whisper of quiet contentment. You remember that life doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful, that joy doesn't have to be big to be real. That peace doesn't come from having everything, it comes from needing less. Being alone at 70 teaches you to stop searching for happiness in the next thing. You find it in the small things. The sacred, ordinary things, the soft laugh to yourself, the smell of something baking, the sound of rain on the roof, the gentle rhythm of a life lived in tune with itself. You stop performing. You stop proving, you stop rushing, and in return, you start living, you start being. You've climbed the mountain, you've earned the view. And now, you sit in that quiet, peaceful space of presence, and you realize something young people don't yet understand. This stillness, this wholeness, this moment, is what you were chasing all along. You just had to live long enough to arrive. And now that you're here, you're better off alone. Not because others can't add value, but because you finally realize you were never missing anything. You were just missing you. Conclusion. Let me tell you something from the heart. If you've made it to 70, you've already won 1,000 silent battles. You've outlived storms that nearly drowned you. You've walked through fire and came out with scars that turned into strength. You've watched time take people you loved, watched dreams fade, and still, somehow, you've kept walking. That kind of journey doesn't make you bitter. It makes you wise. It makes you humble. It makes you quiet in a world that's too loud, still in a world that's always rushing. So if you find yourself alone at 70, don't see it as a punishment. See it as a reward. Because now you're free. Free from pretending, free from proving, free from pleasing people who never saw your worth in the first place. You've got time that belongs to you now, thoughts that aren't drowned out by noise. A soul that's learned how to breathe without needing someone else to tell it how. You've got clarity, peace, space, and let me tell you, there's nothing more powerful than a person who's finally learned to sit with themselves and feel whole. Yes, companionship is beautiful. Family is a blessing, good friends are rare gems, but being alone, that's where you meet the deepest parts of yourself, the parts that don't need applause or validation. It's where you hear your own voice again, where you hear God again, where you learn that silence doesn't mean emptiness. It means you've cleared out the clutter so truth can finally speak. And maybe you're not just better off alone at 70. Maybe you're finally becoming who you were always meant to be, uninterrupted, unfiltered, undistracted. So, don't let the world tell you that aging alone is something to fear. No, it's something to honor, because it means you've lived long enough to understand what really matters. You've let go of what doesn't serve you. You've stopped chasing shadows, and you've returned, at long last, to the quiet, powerful, beautiful core of who you really are. And that, my friend, is a life well lived. Now go enjoy it, alone, yes, but never lonely.